stranger in his own empire. What happens when a man who spent his whole life building an empire from nothing has to disguise himself as an outsider just to realize what he has lost? Columbus City, Ohio. A winter afternoon with temperatures dropping to just 2 degrees Celsius. On the 21st floor of the Walker Group headquarters, the corporation that owns the famous family restaurant chain Walker's Grill, a man stands motionless by the large glass window, his eyes gazing out at the streets shimmering with car lights in the gray afternoon. That man is Raymond Walker, 58 years old, founder, the patriarch of the Walker's Grill empire with more than 15 locations across the southern and midwestern United States. He was once famous for his heartfelt slogan, "Here, everyone is family." But today, that family is on shaky ground. On his desk lies the latest report from the senior management team, cold numbers sharp as a knife cutting into his heart. Revenue still on target, profit even exceeding expectations. But customer feedback, increasing complaints about service quality. Employee turnover rates spiked by 34% in the past 6 months. Some locations accused of discrimination against employees. Raymond clenched the report, his aged eyes narrowing. He quickly flipped to the conclusion section. The situation remains under control. Recommendation: maintain current policies. Raymond let out a laugh, but it was dry, bitter. The laugh of a man who knows the only thing out of control is the truth. He stood silently in that vast office, a place once filled with medals, trophies, and golden photographs from his days as a startup hero. But today, the only thing he was searching for was an answer. Raymond slowly pulled open the drawer under his desk. Inside, no Rolex watch, no symbols of power, only an old, faded, frayed baseball cap. That cap had been with him since the days he worked as a kitchen assistant, washing dishes at a small roadside diner in Cleveland over 30 years ago. He gently ran his hand over the brim of the cap. A cold sensation, so familiar it ached, washed over him. Raymond looked at his hands now covered with calluses from the years gone by. Hands once cracked from soaking in cold water while washing dishes. Hands that had carried every plate of food with the pride of a poor but honest man. And today, those hands were trembling. But not because of age, because of fear. A deep-rooted fear only those who have endured hardship would understand. Have I already lost the most important thing? He looked up at the ceiling. Echoing in his mind were the words of his late wife, the woman who used to wipe his sweat after endless work shifts. Never forget, what makes a restaurant isn't the menu nor the profit, it's how people feel when they walk in and when they walk out. Raymond closed his eyes. A tear, whether from the cold or from pain, fell. He remembered the look of a young female employee lowering her head to ask the manager for an early leave. He remembered the silhouette of a young worker quietly washing dishes, not daring to lift his head to look at anyone. He remembered himself when his hands were still soaked in dishwater, but his head was held higher than anyone else. And he wondered, how many people in my company are living like shadows, whose names I've never even known? Raymond smiled sadly. No longer the smile of a CEO once featured on magazine covers, only the smile of an old man realizing how foolish he'd been if he let this company become a soulless factory. If I don't step into the dirtiest kitchen of the very system I built, then one day, when I die, who will even remember who I once was? He stood up slowly, resolutely, pulled open the drawer and took the old cap, put on a faded hoodie, slipped into his worn-out scuffed shoes. Ready to return to his truest self, a laborer, an old man who once knew how to bow his head, but never bowed to evil. Walker's Grill. Wait for me, I'm coming back. Sometimes, to know if your house is rotten, you have to pretend to be the painter walking around its walls. Raymond Walker. The small Ford Transit van slowly rolled down Livingston Avenue, passing neighborhoods slowly fading with time. Raymond's gray hair peeked out from under his old weathered baseball cap, soaked with mist. Columbus was deep into winter, and the streets around Eastland Town Center were as cold and lifeless as the soulless figures in yesterday's internal report. Raymond took a deep breath, the sharp scent of gasoline and damp smoke filling his lungs. They don't teach you this in any CEO handbook. In the distance, the Walker's Grill branch came into view, its dim neon lights barely visible through the dust-streaked windows. The old awning with peeling paint, the slogan, "Where everyone feels like family," faded and blurred, as if even the sign itself was questioning that message. Raymond pushed the door open and stepped inside. Inside was another world, noisy, chaotic, heavy with the smell of grease and exhaustion. Scratched tables, wobbly plastic chairs, walls hung with cozy decorative pictures that felt misplaced amid the gloomy space. A young woman maneuvered her way between two tables to deliver a dish. Emily, her uniform wrinkled, her hair tied back carelessly, her hurried steps like she was trying to escape something. "Sorry for the wait. Your food will be right out." She bowed her head, eyes avoiding direct contact. Raymond sat down at a table in the back corner. He pretended to be a delivery driver waiting for an order confirmation. No one noticed him. From the kitchen, a loud shout cut through the air like a knife. "Emily, do you even know how to count? You messed up order number 42. The voice of Nick Carter, the shift manager, rang out like a cold punch to the eardrums. Emily flinched, nearly spilling the tray of drinks. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I'll fix it right away." Raymond sat motionless. His eyes followed the young girl, the one who apologized for being scolded. The way she hunched her shoulders, shrank her neck, bowed her head, it was painfully familiar, exactly like him 30 years ago, shivering, afraid, swallowing his anger just to keep a job. What have I built? A decent place, or a more sophisticated human grinding machine? Emily returned to the table. A difficult customer grumbled about the cold food. "I've waited 10 minutes for a stone-cold burger?" She nodded repeatedly, apologizing profusely, sweat soaking the collar of her shirt. Raymond realized she wasn't tired from the workload. She was tired from always having to apologize for things that weren't her fault. Raymond stood up, walking toward the counter. Nick Carter was busy scolding the kitchen staff, completely ignoring Emily. He overheard employees whispering, "She's a single mom. What can she do but endure? Boss Nick is tough if you can't handle the pressure. Just quit." Raymond turned away. His heart pounded faster, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. What kind of family lets their daughter live like this? After the rush hour passed, Emily leaned against the wall, holding her stomach. Raymond approached her, gently asking, "How many hours have you worked today?" "I started at 9 a.m. It's almost 7 p.m. now. Have you taken a break?" "No, we're short-staffed." Raymond remained silent. His eyes were as still as a winter lake, but beneath them lay a deep well of fury. This is my fault, not Nick's, not the customers, not this girl's. This was the fault of a CEO who had stayed away from the kitchen for too long. When Raymond stepped out the back door of the restaurant, it was pitch dark. He didn't head straight to his van. He stood beneath the yellow street lamp, breathing heavily like someone who had just undergone emotional surgery. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from his assistant. "Do you want me to book your ticket for the Southern Regional Leadership Conference next week?" He didn't reply. He just looked back at the back door of the branch, where Emily had just appeared with 2 heavy trash bags, and whispered to himself, "No, there's something more important right here, right in this trash bin." Only when the kitchen door closes do we hear the sound of people in pain. From the very first day he stepped into the Eastland Town Center branch disguised as a seasonal delivery man, Raymond Walker was no longer the CEO. He was the one wiping tables, taking out the trash, scrubbing floors, and the only one quietly observing everything. The kitchen was hot, the air thick with the smell of old grease and sweat. Every day, Raymond started at 8 a.m. No one made him do it, he volunteered. He wanted to experience every level of how a branch operated, from the kitchen to the register, from mopping floors to running takeout orders. At first, no one paid him much attention. Just an old man fumbling around, a bit slow, not great with the POS machine. Nothing remarkable, but he knew how to listen. Marco, the kitchen assistant, Mexican-born, spoke English hesitantly. He was nearly 40, tall, dark-skinned, with a forehead constantly wet with sweat. Marco was the main cook for savory dishes, extremely talented, but no one knew because Nick never gave him credit. One night, as Raymond quietly scrubbed the kitchen floor, Marco looked over and whispered, "You really used to work in kitchens? I used to wash dishes." "Me too, but now I cook all the signature dishes. No one knows." Nick says, "Just get it done. You don't need to be famous." Raymond looked at Marco's hands, sinewy, covered in knife scars, yet every movement was gentle and precise. "You have a family?" "My wife's sick. I work 3 shifts to cover her medicine. I can't afford to take time off." Raymond nodded, his heart clenched because he remembered once promising, no one in this system should have to live like a slave just to survive. One day in the kitchen, Nick Carter, the arrogant shift manager, was shouting into the face of a young man named Lucas. "You drop 1 plate of pancakes and just freeze like that? You think I pay you to stare blankly at me?" Raymond stood there holding a mop, saying nothing, but his hand clenched tightly. Mid-shift, Emily slipped into the storage room, dizzy. Raymond followed, pretending to check the inventory logs. The girl was sitting on a stack of cardboard boxes, clutching her head. The flickering light above, its dim glow, made the scene look like a documentary about post-war labor. "You all right?" "I'm okay. Just need a few minutes." "Have you eaten today?" "Just half a sandwich around 11. It's past 5 p.m. now, I think." Raymond said nothing. He turned away, pulled a protein bar from his pocket, one he'd bought earlier, and handed it to her. Emily looked at him, surprised. "You're too kind. But you shouldn't do that. If Nick sees you, he'll get mad." Raymond gave a faint smile. "I'm not afraid of that guy." It sounded like an offhand comment, but deep down, it was like a knife twisting inward. "I built this system, and now employees are afraid of the people I hired." That night, Raymond sat in his car, his hand covering his forehead, heart pounding fast. On the seat next to him lay his personal phone. He opened the mini camera hidden in his shirt pocket from the previous day. Footage of Nick yelling at Emily, even shouting at an elderly customer for ordering the wrong dish, played clearly, like a stain that could never be washed off the logo bearing his name. "This is not how I want to be remembered. This is not what I promised my wife, not what I intend to leave behind for my children and grandchildren." The next morning, Raymond arrived for his shift early. While the restaurant was still quiet, he quietly cleaned the ordering counter, wiping every coffee stain, rearranging every menu by hand, just like he used to do in the old days. Suddenly, an elderly customer walked in, an old black man leaning on a cane, wearing a worn-out coat. Nick stood behind the counter, watching the old man approach, sneering, "Sir, we don't serve coffee outside business hours. What are you doing here?" Before Raymond could react, the customer spoke. "I used to eat here when my wife was alive. I just want to sit for a bit. The corner table, the one she liked." Nick chuckled coldly. "Sorry, sir, that table is reserved." No one had reserved that table. Raymond suddenly felt his throat tighten. How could a place once called home become so cold and unwelcoming? That was the moment. Raymond made his decision. He texted his personal assistant, "Prepare a full staff meeting for the Eastland branch. I want a complete attendance list. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., formal attire." After texting his assistant, Raymond sat quietly in his car, his eyes following the stream of people passing by the store. The figure of the elderly customer from that morning remained vivid in his mind. He thought back to those early days when he and his wife built Walker's Grill from the ground up. They had chosen every single table together, every picture on the wall, and even crafted the very first menu by hand. His wife always emphasized, "We don't just sell food, we create a place where people feel at home." Those memories now replayed like slow-motion footage, every moment surfacing clearly in Raymond's mind. He felt a dull, lingering ache realizing that the place that once symbolized warmth and friendliness had now become cold and unfamiliar. Calling for a full staff meeting wasn't just about fixing the branch's operations. It was about restoring the spirit and core values he and his wife had painstakingly built over the years. Raymond knew that to do so, he had to start with himself, by listening and understanding the people working there. He took a deep breath, his eyes steady and determined as he looked ahead. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new beginning for Walker's Grill. And that night, for the first time in many years, Raymond cried. Not out of sadness, but because he realized he had found what he thought he had lost, the heart of a founder. Columbus, early Monday morning, 7:53 a.m. The atmosphere inside Walker's Grill, Eastland Branch, was thick, as if someone had drained all the oxygen from the room. All employees had received the same short message. 8 a.m., full staff meeting. Be on time. Important. Emily clenched both hands tightly, standing near the order counter, her eyes filled with worry. Lucas, the young server, whispered, "Are we about to get laid off?" Marco stood silently in the kitchen, wiping his knives, saying nothing. And Nick Carter, the shift manager, sat proudly on a high chair, sipping his coffee, his tone half joking, half mocking. "Another stunt from the regional director. Numbers go down. They need someone to blame. Knew it." 8 a.m., sharp. The door swung open. A man walked in, salt and pepper hair, black suit, white shirt, purple tie, his eyes sharp as blades. The room went dead silent. Young employees swallowed hard. Nick scowled, his brows furrowed. What are you doing here?" The man didn't answer right away. He walked straight to the front, pulled a name badge from his coat pocket, and placed it on the table. "Raymond Walker, founder and CEO. I'm here to speak with my family." The room erupted silently in the minds of every person present. Emily dropped her folder, her lips moved but no words came out. Lucas's eyes widened, stammering, You're... Raymond scanned the room. "I've been with you for 2 weeks, not as a CEO but as a floor cleaner. I saw everything. I heard everything." His voice wasn't loud but sharp and final, like a judge's gavel. "I saw people like Emily being humiliated. I saw Marco working like a machine, never being recognized. And I saw people like Nick using power to dominate, not to lead." Nick jumped up, shouting, "Wait! This is slander! I was just trying to maintain standards. I followed protocol. These kids are weak. If they can't handle pressure, they should quit." Raymond stared directly into his eyes, then pressed a remote. The screen lit up. Footage recorded by the hidden camera he had carried for 2 weeks played one by one. Emily being scolded and belittled. Marco working non-stop, skipping meals. An elderly customer being dismissed and turned away. And the cold, cruel voice of Nick Carter slicing through the brand's dignity like a blade. Nick's face turned pale. His lips twitched. He stammered, You can't do this. I followed protocol. I kept the revenue up. I didn't do anything wrong." Raymond looked at him, not the slightest tremble in his tone. "You followed protocol, but you failed morally. Revenue can be rebuilt, but once character is lost, nothing can buy it back." And then he spoke, slowly, firmly. "Nick Carter, as of this moment, you are terminated. No apologies needed. No explanations accepted." Nick slammed his hand on the table, roaring, "I worked for you for 5 years. Without me, this branch would have collapsed a long time ago." Raymond stepped closer, looking at him the way a father might look at a wayward son. "You kept the numbers up, but you killed trust. And I will never allow that to exist under my name." Nick ripped the manager badge from his chest and threw it to the floor. The sound of it hitting the ground echoed like a life sentence. He brushed past Raymond. His shoulders shook. No one knew whether from rage, humiliation, or the sting of finally tasting true accountability. He pushed open the door, leaving behind the eyes of those who once feared him, now filled with nothing but disdain. A failure. A man who lost the game of the human heart. The room was silent. Then from the kitchen, Marco stepped forward. "You saw me. Thank you for that." Emily turned around, eyes still red, and softly said, "I never believed I had worth until today." Raymond nodded, inhaling deeply. "I didn't come here just to fix a problem. I came to apologize. I forgot why Walker's Grill was born. But today, I remember." He stood in the middle of the room, the place once called the family counter. His voice rose like an oath at the very beginning. From today, no one will be humiliated for being poor. No one will be looked down on for being weak. No one will be forgotten because of the small position they hold. Walker's Grill will start over, right here, from this very place. The morning light shone through the glass window. On the wall, the old weathered sign still bore the familiar words, "Here, everyone is family." For the first time in many years, Raymond looked at it and smiled. Reborn from the heart of a true leader. That morning in Columbus, the dawn seemed gentler than any other day. After the storms of the past days, the skies over Eastland Town Center felt as though they had been swept clean of all remaining shadows. Standing in front of Walker's Grill, Eastland Branch, Raymond Walker stood motionless, gazing inside. The little restaurant he had once built, once loved, once forgotten, today was once again the place where he was ready to begin everything anew, not starting with money, not starting with sales pressure, but starting with the people inside it. Raymond pulled open the door and stepped in. The restaurant was still quiet. The familiar scent of coffee lingered in the air. The soft sound of the coffee machine was like a quiet breath. The kitchen was still cold, but his heart was slowly warming up. He looked around the counter. His eyes landed on each person. Emily, wiping down tables, her small hands steady and strong. Lucas, fumbling as he cleaned the corner shelf. Marco, the quiet, dedicated chef, still carefully preparing his knives and utensils. The special meeting began, not a typical report meeting, no documents, no slides, just a small circle, right in the heart of the restaurant where he had placed his whole heart. Raymond stood among them. His voice was hoarse after days of heavy emotions, but his gaze had never been steadier. He asked one question, a question no employee ever thought their boss would ask them. When was the last time you came to work and felt happy? The whole restaurant fell silent. No one answered immediately. Some lowered their heads. Some gave awkward smiles. Some looked confused. Marco was the first to speak, his deep voice echoing, "When I made a dish, and the customer said it was delicious." Emily, the fragile girl who once fought through bitterness, whispered softly, "When I got to leave work on time to pick up my child." Lucas, the clumsy young waiter, murmured, "When I could laugh without being afraid of getting scolded." Raymond smiled, the smile of a father who had realized he had once lost his way, but whose children were still waiting for him to come home. He spoke, "So from today, I won't promise to double our revenue. I won't promise this system will become the most successful overnight. But I promise, every day you come to work here will be a day worth remembering. Because you'll be treated as human, because you'll be respected." And he truly meant it. He set up a small break corner behind the kitchen, a space with warm water, a chair to sit on, and a few old books for staff to relax during their shifts. He hung a small mailbox near the bar with a simple message written on it. "Tell me how your day went." He appointed Marco as the acting head chef, not for the title, but because that man deserved to step into the light. For the first time, he stood before all the staff and bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Emily, for the days you had to endure in silence." Emily cried, but this time they were tears of relief. Customers started coming back, the old ones, the ones who seemed to have forgotten Walker's Grill. The ones who once left the restaurant with wounds in their hearts were now sitting again at their old tables and smiling. The elderly customer who had been turned away days ago came back. He sat at the same old table, sipping a warm cup of coffee, and slowly said, "Thank you for letting me sit here as a decent human being." That evening, Raymond stood quietly on the restaurant's front porch. The sun was setting slowly, its light stretched across the old window pane, reflecting the faded words that had hung on the wall for so many years. "Here, everyone is family." He reached into his pocket and took out an old photo, a picture of his late wife, Amelia. He gazed at her for a long time, and he spoke very softly, but the words echoed like an oath before heaven and earth. "You see, Amelia, I've heard you now. I've remembered why we started." Walker's Grill and the journey from a small restaurant to a human-centered leadership philosophy, Columbus, 3 months after the greatest turning point in CEO Raymond Walker's life. The atmosphere inside Walker's Grill, Eastland branch, was now completely different. Laughter, conversations, the sound of orders being called out, all carried with them a sense of kindness woven into every small action. The restaurant hadn't just come back to life, it was truly alive again, through the hearts of everyone inside. One early morning in May, Raymond was wiping down the wooden table in the center of the restaurant, the one where the elderly gentleman had once returned, bringing with him memories of his late wife, when his phone buzzed. A new email from Ihwa Asia Leadership Summit, Singapore 2025. Dear Mr. Raymond Walker, we are deeply moved by your leadership story and the rebirth journey of Walker's Grill. We are honored to invite you to join the Human-Centered Business Leadership Forum at Singapore 2025 under the theme, The Power of Kindness, Ethical Leadership in a New Era. Raymond read it over and over, not because he didn't believe the invitation was real, but because in that moment he remembered Amelia's eyes, the eyes of his late wife, who used to ask him, "Why are you building this restaurant, really?" Singapore, Marina Bay Sands, International Convention Center. On stage, beneath the soft glow of warm yellow lights, in front of hundreds of business leaders from around the world, CEO Raymond Walker stepped up. No prepared speech, no list of achievements, no million-dollar figures. He simply spoke in his own voice. I'm not here to talk about growth rates. I didn't come to present a grand case study on tech or digital platforms. I just want to tell the story of a small restaurant, a place that once forgot that people are its greatest asset. And I want to share this. When you run a business and forget about the people, you will pay the price. But when you have the courage to pause, to apologize, to listen, to change, that's when miracles begin to happen. The auditorium fell completely silent. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from those who have truly failed, and then stood up, kinder than before. After the speech, many people came to shake Raymond's hand. A young female CEO from Indonesia, her voice choked with emotion, said, "I never thought that leading with humanity could have such power." Raymond smiled. Because leadership is not about being the best. Leadership is about being the fastest to admit mistakes and fix them. He declined most of the glamorous invitations that followed. He returned to Columbus, returned to his small restaurant, returned to Marco, the once quiet chef who was now a mentor for the younger generation, returned to Emily, the once fragile girl, now confident, strong, and smiling brightly behind the bar. Returned to the little corner where the old wooden sign still hung, a place he knew so well. This place doesn't just serve food, this place nurtures the human spirit. That afternoon, Raymond stood outside Walker's Grill, looking through the window, where real laughter had returned. On the wooden wall, the old sign still hung quietly, a silent witness to every change. Here, everyone is family. Walker's Grill and the journey of expanding through kindness. Columbus, early autumn. The sky was quietly clear and blue. The maple tree in front of the restaurant had begun to change color, a few golden leaves swaying as if waving farewell, signaling the arrival of a new season. Raymond Walker returned from his trip to Singapore without trophies, without medals. The only thing he brought back was the look of admiration from strangers, and one unshakable conviction in his heart. If kindness can change one restaurant, why can't it change an entire system? At Walker's Grill Eastland, the atmosphere remained as warm as a freshly baked morning pie. Emily was no longer the server who only knew how to bow her head. She now led training sessions for new hires, speaking with a smile and with the story she had once lived through. Marco was still in the kitchen, but no longer alone. He was teaching a 17-year-old boy named Jay how to fillet a fish without tearing the skin. More importantly, he was teaching with the patience of someone who had once lived in the shadows. One Thursday afternoon, Raymond received an invitation from Northwestern University, Chicago. "We would like you to speak to our management students about something textbooks can't teach." Why would a wealthy CEO choose to mop floors? He smiled, nodded, without hesitation. This trip to Chicago wasn't like previous business trips. This time, Raymond didn't bring financial reports or presentation slides. He brought Emily and Marco not to show off model employees, but because they were living proof of one thing. A business is only truly successful when the people inside it are healed. Standing before hundreds of students, Raymond spoke not as a lecturer, but as a storyteller. I once ran a restaurant chain with nearly 1,000 employees, and then I realized I didn't know the names of even 10 of them. I failed because I built a system, but forgot to build a heart. The hall went quiet. A young student raised a hand. "How do you become a good leader, sir?" Raymond didn't hesitate. "Start by becoming a good human being." On the flight home, Emily turned to him and asked, "Uncle, did you ever think you'd become someone inspiring?" Raymond shook his head and smiled gently. "I'm not here to inspire anyone, Emily. I'm just sharing what I should have done a long time ago." A few weeks later, Walker's Grill opened a new location in Chicago. There was no flashy signage, no grand opening banners, just a clean glass window, an open kitchen filled with the scent of fresh bread, and a wooden sign hanging at the entrance. "Here, everyone is family." The new branch operated under a community restaurant model where employees could receive tuition support if they wanted to continue their education, where customers could contribute to a kind meal fund for the homeless. And every month, the restaurant held a listening day where staff could speak directly to management. Raymond no longer appeared much in the press. He didn't need to. He was there in the kitchen, checking the potatoes, listening to laughter during break time. He was there during internal interviews, asking candidates, "When you're exhausted, do you stay silent, walk away, or speak honestly with your coworkers?" One late evening, he stood outside the new restaurant. The glass door reflected his image, and inside, Marco was explaining a new dish to an intern. Emily was jotting something down on the shift calendar. Raymond looked at the scene and thought to himself, "We're not just opening more restaurants. We're planting seeds that one day may bloom into kindness in places we may never step foot in."